Hey everyone, welcome to the House of Chaos. And my mind is a bit chaotic too, but I'm still managing to drink a beer. I thought I'd talk a bit about Adina, The World of Adina by Moebius, the first of the Dark Horse Library, Moebius Library. I loved it. Excellent book. Also try to mention a few indies quickly. So it's hard to talk about such a big book and a book that goes in so many places, but it does focus on these two characters, Stel and Atan, and puts them through some pretty incredible changes. There may be metaphors to the Garden of Eden and struggles between Satan and God maybe, but no, I don't know. I don't know if what's going on here, really, in the end. But in the intro, he talks about purposefully working on an art style that is very minimal, trying to use less lines to tell more. And it's amazing how well he makes that work. I mean, I found myself just coming back to these pages over and over again, slowing my reading down just to take stuff in, even though often it was kind of a less is more kind of aesthetic. But the whole book is really a collection, I believe, of other books. And the books must have come out, spaced out over a long period of time, and it almost feels like a story that's started by one person, then another person picks it up and has a new interpretation of what's going on and all of that. And then another person and another person, even though they're all Moebius. It's like his thinking and his point of view on the story has shifted, so he goes off in another direction with each sort of larger section or chapter of the book. And one of these is previously unpublished, which blows my mind because I think it needs all of this stuff to, unless it's the very last one, to hold together. But one thing that does happen, and one thing that made me think about the passage of time, is in the middle of the book, the art style changes radically, and Moebius is not doing at all the same art style. It's not as minimal, but also just the whole way he does faces and this coloring style and everything has changed. The bodies are different. So I don't know what to make about that, but I kind of missed the minimalist style and the more flatter coloring, I guess it was. But after a while, I forgot about that, and I was just sucked into the story. But it's very, very dreamlike, and this shifting quality of it makes it kind of like, the classic Philip K. Dick story where you can't tell which layer of reality is the real layer of reality, and it feels like the characters are victims of someone else's playing with their realities, and various characters seem to be the ones playing with their realities at times, and other times towards the end it just seems to get more out of control. I'm just showing art randomly here, but towards the end it seems to get more out of control and even further away from being possibly untangled as to which layer of reality we're supposed to take seriously. But even then, I really enjoyed it. At the end, we get a whole, in the short end piece, we get a whole different layer of reality, which was interesting, but felt like it needed to be expanded upon. Or felt like the whole book should have been shorter if it was leading up to this, if that makes sense. Not that I'm really complaining. All of this leaves me just wanting to get more Moebius books. I would not say that that reading Moebius makes me say, boy, us Americans really can't do things right and the French can. It's just like, boy, this is really different. And I certainly wouldn't want to give up my American-style comic books and only read stuff like this. It would get tiring, but within a certain space, it is just fascinating and mesmerizing. And Mobius has some talent of taking you into his dream world and keeping you there and not making you lose interest, even though it is so dreamlike. Possibly because despite all of the shifting realities, the characters seem so real, and they're the two main characters, and their feelings drive this through the unreality and dreamlike parts of the story. The feelings keep driving through. So, if that sounds interesting to you, I recommend Adina. If you're a collector of, nice hardbacks with beautiful art, I also recommend Adina on that level. It looks like next year, although next year is now not this year, in 2017, they only plan to bring out something called The Art of Adina, and I'm a little puzzled as to what more there could be that would fill a whole hardback book, but I'll definitely get it to see what that is. And then in 2018, they're planning 3 volumes of something called Inside Mobius. I can only guess that might be more shorter pieces by Mobius collected together. Or maybe this is actually a series that focuses on being inside Mobius. I don't know. I don't know if it has a European counterpart or was published in the US before and is now out of print. I wonder if the Mobius library from Dark Horse really will have all Mobius in it, because some Mobius is currently in print from Humanoids. Not a lot, but some. The Ink Owl is, and a few other things he did with Jodorowsky. But anyway, I'm super excited to get lots of these volumes. I hope it's very successful, and Dark Horse publishes a lot of Mobius. I finished up season 2 of Kaiju Max, issues 5 and 6. I think I've said it before, Kaiju Max just keeps getting better. I think it may have gotten better in season 2, or it may be that I read Kaiju Max better in season 2, that I'm even more attuned to what Xander Cannon is doing with his very sad and very funny and imaginative story. It ends on a horrible, tragic note. I felt so bad for the monsters by the end, but there are other things. What was it? Probably the issue in issue 4 that give us huge sympathy for the humans who want to hunt the monsters, and I don't know. The story keeps turning, but I don't know. It's so consistent and yet so full of smaller surprises that I just really love Kaiju Max. Another indie series that I love is Black Hammer. This issue, number 6, was kind of the weakest one so far, but it didn't turn me off to the series or make me worried that I'm not going to like Black Hammer coming up. It just didn't quite sing as true as some of the other issues. It kind of made a play on these kind of House of Mystery kind of characters, but it wasn't as cohesive. It didn't form as much of a whole as other issues. So it was as much a just continuing on of some of the other storylines. But I liked it a lot. The art's still great. This seems like one of the best works Jeff Lemire's done in a long time. And I don't see any sign of it having problems. Because I sort of see Jeff Lemire as someone who often gets off to a good start but then fizzles a bit. Motor Girl by Terry Moore is kind of fizzling for me in the first 2 issues, so hopefully it will get stronger as it goes along. Rachel Rising was so strong. Maybe my expectations are wrong. But I felt like issue 2 sort of confirmed this story as kind of a solipsistic story where there's really only one character, because the main people she interacts with, the monkey, the gorilla, is established now to be imaginary, and so are these aliens coming to visit. We have a very definitive scene where she thinks she's washing the alien ship. Someone comes up and there's nothing. There's no sign of the aliens at all. Unless he's playing with us and Terry Moore is going to show that the aliens indeed do exist, but manage to make themselves only seen by Motor Girl. And then the other, this old lady character is kind of fun, but then the other characters who showed up, the kind of mafiosa land deal lawyer types, they seem straight out of kind of a B movie or something. They don't seem like very strong characters, and they add to the feel, even though they are physically real, they add to the feeling of you're not reading a very real story. So I feel guilty for not falling in love with Terry Moore in this particular series, but I still have high hopes that it will get better. I think it's planned to just be 15 issues or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure. Green Valley, I understand, is 6 or 7 issues. I really enjoyed these first three issues. I read them all together. It has a nice sense of humor, a light touch. It's a bit Hollywood-ish, but he is a Hollywood writer. But it's also a kind of story that it's hard to imagine this actually being made into a movie. It's a bit too much on the quirky side. And part of me, when the wizard, this is a bit of a spoiler, at least if you've only read the first 2 issues, when the wizard shows up and turns out to be a time traveler and someone who seems to be from our time, but maybe from a bit in the future when they've invented time travel. His time travel machine looks kind of like an iPad. But anyway, that was both a clever twist and a disappointment. So now I'm reading this as kind of a science fiction story and still enjoying it. But yeah, it was kind of on the nose in a way. The idea of the time traveler going back in time and being the wizard, kind of a very old idea, but still a good one. Shadows on the Grave by Corbin. I love me some Corbin. I love Corbin's art. I love his weird take on horror, which is, very rooted in EC and Creepy magazine. Of course, he was a major player in Creepy and Eerie magazine. And just has this Corbin feel that nothing else quite has. But as other people have said in this first issue, the stories felt a bit rushed. All of them, there were 4 short stories in here. All of them felt like they needed a few extra pages to make you care more. You could sort of see what he was going for and see what the horror was, but you didn't feel it so much, particularly in the first 2 stories, the story about the kids who were marionettes and the story about the people who crash their plane and land on the strange island that does strange things to them. It all ends very quickly, and this story particularly, to me, had shades of kind of a creepy or eerie story that Corbin might have done, but it just felt like it needed a little more. Of course, maybe back in the Creepy and Eerie days, I was less critical. I was just blown away by that Corbin art. The third horror story still could have used an extra page about the wife who kills her husband, but her husband doesn't die anyway. But it did, the pathos of it and the feeling of some quirky small town kind of worked for me. I kind of like that. You'll notice if you look closely at Corbin art that this is Corbin doing his heavy ink art, and then he's just kind of coloring it with grays, as opposed to his more well-known or more Corbin-esque kind of airbrushed-looking art, where everything's gradations of gray or gradations of color in a color picture. But then the last story here, which is just part 1 of who knows how many parts about these strange kind of Greek mythological characters of a sort, that one is back to the grayscale, the art, the airbrush, kind of look. And that was actually my least favorite, mostly because I think it was just beginning to get going. Kind of begs the question, why doesn't he do just a short series about this character. What was it called? He even says at the beginning that it's somehow related to Den, and it's called Danaeus. So why doesn't he just do a Danaeus comic? And then maybe I would recommend to him, like, taking any of these stories and making them at least half a comic's length, if not a whole comic's length, and just take his time a little more. But still, I want more Corbin. I think this second issue is already out. If it weren't for the weather here in Portland, I would probably have it by now. I'm still eager to get more Corbin. I'm going to keep reading Reborn, but I feel in no rush here. It's kind of in a lull. Issue 1 was really good. Issue 2 hinted there might be some interesting twists coming up. Issue 3 feels like it has no twists. It's just the plain vanilla fantasy story. It's got Greg Capullo art, which is very nice. Greg Capullo can do fantasy fine, but so can a lot of other artists, like the artist on Birthright, for instance. To me, is just as good a fantasy artist as Greg Capullo. So when Capullo does Batman, I kind of feel like no one else can touch him. I still really like this and like this Capullo art, but I think because of that first issue, something's got to happen before this thing wraps up, and I think this is a mini-series too, like 6 or 7 issues. Something's got to happen to make it have some newer level of depth, or just some crazy twists to it that show that things are not at all what they seem to be. I think that's still a strong possibility here. Well, because of the chaos of everything, I know I've read a lot of other indies, but I can't find them at the moment. I don't know where they are. So maybe I'll, if I find time, do another Comic Book Thoughts video on a lot of the DC comics I've been reading lately. And I look forward to watching all your videos about the comics you've been reading. Talk to you later.